Welcome to the Doc Y Exchange. I'm your host, Doc Y. And in today's episode, we're diving into one of my favorite topics, technology in education. Now, technology has transformed the way we live, learn, and work. And who better to join us today than the Vice President of Innovative Learning for the Public Education Foundation in Chattanooga, Mr. Michael Stone.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here with you today.
Thank you so much for being here. Before we jump into the conversation, I have had the opportunity to review your distinguished career, but could you share with our listeners a little bit about yourself, your background, and the exciting work you're doing in the field of education?
Sure. Started as actually started in IT very briefly, and then moved quickly into education. I taught science and then very short. I was not qualified, but very shortly after that, moved to teach math, which what I was actually trained in. So I taught high school math and computer science for 10 years in private and public schools here in Southeast Tennessee, and then my last year in the classroom had an opportunity to open a fab lab at STEM School Chattanooga, which was really an incredible, just a turning point in my career. The principal there had this vision of, what would be possible? How could we rethink school and the education experience for students if they could literally make almost anything? And so I did not have a background. I wasn't like in the maker movement. I wasn't really into like 3D printing and laser cutting and that sort of stuff, but I was definitely interested in doing school differently and providing as many authentic opportunities for students as possible. Following that, I spent a year serving as a Einstein Fellow and Albert Einstein Educator Fellow at the National Science Foundation in Washington, D.C. And then I came to Chattanooga, came back home in 2016 and joined the Public Education Foundation. And here I've had a lot of opportunities. We lead a lot of work. I have a small but mighty team. We do a lot of work around teacher professional development, school leader professional development. My department does a little bit of work with students. I think we may talk about some of that with the game design challenge later in the episode here. But most of our work is really focused on empowering teachers and school leaders to not just think different about school, but really think about how are we preparing students to be able to experience success both today and in the world that's coming.
Awesome. That is so fantastic. And it's always so inspiring to hear how much work is actually being done at the intersection of technology and education. A lot of people really don't think about that is an intersection and not a automatic marrying of the two spheres. So let's kick things off with a big picture question.
Sure.
You've been in the field of education for quite a while, and you've witnessed the evolution firsthand. How have you seen technology transform education, particularly with initiatives like the Volkswagen eLabs and STEM Fellows?
Sure. So uh, my blink reaction to that question is I wish it had already transformed education more. I think there's lots and lots of opportunity for us to leverage technology to give students more personalized experiences, especially with the emergence of generative AI. And I know that's controversial in school right now, and it should be. There's a lot we don't know about it, and it may be the next fad that fades away, but I'm not sure that's true. But what's become clear is if you think over the last 25 years, we've shifted from you have to have computers at school for a computer lab, and we weren't even sure why. We just knew we needed them, right? And then the internet became prolific, and nobody today puts I can use the internet on my resume, right? It's a foundational skill and expectation in any role. So we've seen over the last couple of decades, students have and teachers, right, have lived through this evolution from, well, yeah, we've got some computers that you play Oregon Trail on in the back of the room, right, to like now we've got to get on the internet, to suddenly, in the last decade, the emergence of digital fabrication has given us this ability with things like 3D printers and laser cutters and computer controlled routers, right? Suddenly a student can design a solution to a problem in their community in New Jersey, and that solution can be shared remotely and replicated in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and vice versa, right? So not only have we become more connected, right, but suddenly we have this incredible opportunity for students to be presented with real problems and actually create functional solutions when that's possible, right? So that's the technology side. When that's possible on the education side, it really has to be a catalyst for us in the in K-12 education and education in general to start thinking differently about what are how are we positioning students to take advantage of that kind of technology, right? When that's possible, when I don't have to learn um, uh, traditional sort of academic concepts that are sometimes trivialized. I was a math teacher, so a lot of times we trivialize math so we can teach procedural fluency. Right? We'll come up
Right.
with trivial problems. I never forget doing a train leaves Boston, a train leaves Chicago problem with my kids, and my kids are like, I've never seen a train. You're like, oh, right. That's not all that practical, right? But it's a great way to teach some things about rate and momentum and motion. And so we'll do these sort of trivial problems. Well, suddenly we don't have to be trivial. And the student's experience doesn't have to be trivial, right?
Mhm.
They can actually create real solutions. So when that's possible, that's a lot of our work with the Volkswagen eLabs is providing access to that possibility. We have opened 51 labs with Volkswagen's partnership here in Hamilton County, and that's out of the 79 schools that are available. They're all in public schools. They're all registered through the Fab Foundation that spun out of MIT, where Fab Labs were invented about 2000 2005 or so. Um, that gives access. That's important, right? So that provides ubiquitous access to students, regardless of demographics or the community they live in, or the community they come from. That's step one. You can't do any of that without access, right? But step two is like just because you have cool tools in a room doesn't mean you've changed the learning and preparation experience, right? There is a human
Absolutely.
element to this always. And in school, the current construct, that human element hinges on what principals and teachers are empowered to do and sort of and equipped to do. So our STEM fellows work and a lot of the work with the VWE labs includes significant amounts of professional development. Most of that looks like us asking compelling questions and having really innovative teachers be in a room together and attack those questions. And we believe deeply in the idea that iron sharpens iron. And so being able to put teachers in these sort of cohort experiences where they can find like-minded educators from diverse backgrounds, lean on each other, and then start to develop these strategies to say, okay, how do we position students to really take advantage of this technology to transform their experience? Because so that we can prepare them to be successful, whether that's some of our kids may use 3D printers. They may in their career be additive manufacturer engineers. Most of them won't, right? Statistically, that's not that many jobs. So a big piece of, I guess, the third leg of this stool, right? So there's access to technology, there's equipping the teachers. The third leg, and I just couldn't answer this question, not mention this, is we lean really hard into what we call essential skills. The different states call them like transcendent skills or durable skills. We called them soft skills when
Mhm.
I was growing up, right? These ideas of like equipping students to learn how to learn, to be self starters, to be able to work collaboratively in a team, to be creative problem solvers, to be critical thinkers, and to be resilient. Right? These sort of essential skills that really transcend like that has nothing to do with using a 3D printer or coding a microbit or whatever, and it really has very little to do with instructional strategy. It's really about making sure we're being intentional about putting students in this position to develop those kinds of skills. So that's for us. If there were like three things we're about, it's definitely access, equipping and empowering educators and leaders, and then making sure that we elevate those essential skills.
That is absolutely amazing. When I taught my background is in K-12, so I taught every subject K-12 before coming to higher education, and so understanding and making those real world connections for the students so that they actually get to apply what they're learning versus seeing an abstract concept that they think they may or may not use, and then making those critical connections for the students is vitally important. So, with
Absolutely.
all these advancements, I imagine there are also significant challenges. What are some of the biggest challenges you see with the increasing reliance on technology in both education and daily life?
Oh, wow, that's a big loaded question.
Loaded.
I'm gonna be a lot shorter on this, so you can push us in the direction you want this to go. Because that boy, that is big. I mean, I think on a so I'll say on a personal level, I have four daughters that are age 5 to 15, so kindergarten to freshman.
Ooh.
So yeah, pray for me. I'm living this in every kind of way on at the home front, but also professionally. And I think we see similar things in both domains, right? That I like to be doing a lot of talks about generative AI, like Chat GPT and Copilot and then Claude from Anthropic, right? These different engines that are coming out and becoming pervasive. And when we talk about those, I'll often say, if you think about the last 2 decades or so, it'd be really easy to like we can easily claim, I think safely claim the internet has had a profoundly positive impact on society, right? All kinds of good has come from the internet. You don't have to work hard to make a similar argument that the internet has had an incredibly negative impact on society, right? Like it's a tool and the tools are as useful as their user, right? And so
Yes.
I think as technology continues to evolve, right? I'd say the same thing about generative AI. Should we be scared of it? And are there some things we should tiptoe in with trepidation? Absolutely. There's a ton that the most advanced researchers in the world don't know about how those models are working behind the scenes. That should cause all of us some pause. And thinking about students interacting with it, we absolutely should be careful. On the flip side, does it have the profound ability to like personalize experiences for people, provide insights that you otherwise may not have had access to? Absolutely. All right. So I think as we think about technology becoming more pervasive, it's this constant tension between sort
Mhm.
of the how is technology leveraged to improve our lives and what are the sacrifices, the unintended consequences of is it becoming over reliant on technology? Is it reduction of other skills? Is what is it to the detriment of? And that's probably true about most technologies as we consider them. Some of those sacrifices are reasonable. We can sit back and go, that's no big deal. Others, there's addiction, there's lack of, we're super connected but not actually connected. I mean, there's some lack of interpersonal skills, and we definitely see that among students in the classroom today, where man, they're great at making TikTok videos and posting YouTube shorts. Boy, they struggle to just have a regular conversation, right? Just like connecting in person has been a challenge. Right. So I mean, I think that there's all kinds of examples you can kind of poke at, but we can figure out how to leverage. I think part of our responsibility on the education side is figure out how to leverage, like, okay, so we've got some students who, we've got a whole new generation of students who are um, not scared of technology, right? Who quickly adapt, who kind of they think like a computer, right? They sort of get the idea, right? They've grown up with it. They've generally grown up with it on the consumer side. So they've consumed a
Mhm.
lot of technology,
Yes.
or they've used technology to consume a lot of entertainment. So how do we leverage that to go, okay, like, so you have some insight as a user. How do we flip you to be the creator, right? How do we put you in a situation to leverage that technology to be productive and for good?
Oh, wow. So you said the word tension, and I think it is directly related to the word that I thought of with that question, which is balance of the benefits and the challenge.
Mm,
That's critical to find a balance between the two because we're always going to have that tension and they're going to be pulling kind of in opposite directions. But how do we bring balance to the both spheres? So let's look ahead.
yeah,
You mentioned generative AI. And what do you think about the emerging technologies like generative AI? Some of the new robotics, because I know when I was growing up, I thought about when it came to robotics, it was like R2D2 and those different robots that we always saw just on TV. But
right.
now the robots don't look anything like what we envisioned on TV. So even virtual reality, like when we first had access to the goggles, or you had to go to an amusement park or the mall to experience VR. Now everybody has the latest and the greatest with VR, and they're tearing up their TVs because they're throwing the controllers through the TVs and stuff like that. So it's pervasive in our worlds. What do you think about that? And how do you see them influencing the future of education and student learning?
So I'm a natural optimist. I'm a glass half full kind of guy. So let me give that bias on the front end here. I'll just call attention to that. So I talked earlier, like there are definitely things we should be thinking about conscientious of. That's me trying to be a responsible adult. Um, my heart is that I get excited because I see what technology can empower kids to do. I get to thinking about, like, I get overwhelmed with optimism and hope when I think about how a student can use generative AI, and we're starting to pilot this. I know that lots of communities are. They can use generative AI for personalized tutoring, right? That suddenly, if I don't have a caregiver at home, maybe I'm a latchkey kid, and there's not a caregiver when I get home, or
Mhm.
maybe my parents or whoever I'm coming home to don't have a high enough level of education they can help me with some of the advanced concepts I may be struggling through. Suddenly, I can get real time tutoring, and it can be effective in a way, and relatively low cost or free. That's pretty powerful. I think about the Blue Sky Tennessee Institute that Blue Cross runs with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee runs with ETSU here in Chattanooga. It's an amazing accelerated program. Requires huge investment, both in terms of financial investment, but people, and their metrics are incredible for what they're doing to push students through a program very quickly to earn a degree and prepare them for workforce. That isn't a technology solution, but what I get excited about is they're thinking different about how we're preparing students to enter the world. It's helping those of us who do work in this sort of intersection of technology and education think, okay, as they're showing proof of concept, how can we reduce the cost by leveraging technology? And that particular institute's focused on preparing students for IT careers, which is
Mhm.
awesome, right? And talk about a field that is probably going to experience radical change in the next 5 years,
Yes.
right? I mean, it's not coming; it's here. And so, thinking about um, how we how we can break down some barriers, and I think one of the things that the Blue Sky, I keep talking about that, the Blue Sky Tennessee Institute has done that particularly well is they worked with ETSUs to figure out when they were starting. So those that don't know, it's an accelerated post secondary program. Students can earn a bachelor's degree in computer science in 22 months. Um, Last dollar scholarship basically makes it free. It's pretty incredible. What they get, it's all job embedded with an IT team there
Yes.
at their campus. Just amazing stuff,
Yeah.
right? So like thinking about that program and how students what they're doing for students, that they, without really leveraging modern technological sort of possibilities, that they broke down so many barriers and were able to not just attract but retain and support students to matriculate through who were from traditionally underserved communities, from minoritized communities, who didn't come from necessarily families with means, from high socioeconomic backgrounds. um, like that graduating class, just at face value, looks different than most computer science
Yes.
graduating classes. They did that with a ton of people and money resources. Thinking about how we can scale that and leverage technology is, I mean, that's a super microscopic example, but I think it's a powerful one, because it starts to look at how do we pilot things with people, and then how do we scale things with technology becomes a really interesting conversation point. I don't know if I answered your
Absolutely.
question at all, but I'll stop
No,
there.
no, 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 you did. And you, I'm the site director for the Blue Sky Tennessee Institute. And
Oh, I didn't know that.
so,
Oh, nice to
yes,
meet you.
nice to meet you also. But hearing different people in the community talk about our program and what they see from our program gives me a different perspective because I'm a professor in the program. And so it just changes my viewpoint and helps me to see the impact that it is having in the community because I can see every day the impact that we're having with the students, but I don't always get to see the impact and the thoughts that our community has
Mm,
about the program and the impact that it could have career wise for opening doors and creating opportunities for students that they never could imagine. I have the idea of that,
right.
but hearing the community say that to me and how it's truly impacting them is a whole different ballgame that I'm really, really, truly interested in connecting and understanding and hearing more about.
Awesome. I hope I didn't misrepresent it, but um
No, you did an amazing job. And one of the things that I really, really like about the program that you did touch on is the job embedded internships that they have. They're paid to work while they're in school. Most students get one opportunity for a semester internship. The students in the program get 3 semesters worth of internship experience
right. And it's
working
not based
here.
on the social capital of their family. right? They're not
It
hoping
sure
mom or
isn't.
dad has a connection. It's baked into the project. That I mean, I think that's a huge, huge piece. And as we think about the I've run the game design challenge that we've used for a few years to help, basically, in our community, most of our schools don't really offer rigorous computer science, certainly not the
Right.
high school level. So, regardless of the sort of neighborhood that the school serves, most of our students get to their senior year and have had, at most, a very limited exposure to computing. And so part of the recruiting we started when Blue Sky Institute was started was like, how do we even like entice kids to be aware? Like, how do we even, not we don't want to lure kids in and that aren't a good fit, but how do you even spark the like, this might be for me. I might like this. I might be
Right.
good at it. I should check this out kind of thing. And so we came up with this idea. What's coming up in a couple weeks for this fall is like, let's have kids just make a video game in a custom controller. We use a visual programming platform. It kind of looks like Scratch. It's from Make Code Arcade, and so it gives them a foundation. Every kid can make a pretty easy game like a side scroller, but then they can also, make a custom controller in the Fab Lab. It gives every kid an access point, right? If I'm super artistic and I want to make the controller look cool, awesome. There's a place for me. If I'm mechanical, I want to fiddle with the buttons, cool. There's a place for me. I want to be into coding. I want to think about the
Yes.
logic and how the elements in the game interact. Place for me. Like for us, that was a pretty easy lift when we started. The games weren't great, but this is to the question. Like now this year, we're going to be able to integrate Microsoft Copilot in that. That's what the school
Mhm.
system uses and has access to. So suddenly, kids can just focus on dreaming about the game that they want to build, and they can turn over the majority of the coding to the generative AI engine. So it allows us to sort of pick and choose the spots. That's not to say they don't need to learn coding, but in one day we couldn't teach them that much coding
Right.
anyways.
Yes.
So it lets us hook the students, right? Give them an authentic experience. So they go, I got a game from my head into reality. It's playable. Sudden, when that happens, the follow up behind that, you get to come behind and go, okay, so do you know when the ball bounces across the screen? Here's what's actually happening. What if you wanted to
Yes.
make it look like slow motion?
Yes.
That's powerful, right? I mean, that's the kind of
Yes.
hook that we're trying to grab a hold of.
Yes, it breaks down those barriers and those obstacles for them to make their dreams a reality
Right.
because they sit, they dream, they see, they play these activities, these games online, they engage with social media, and sometimes they actually say, I wonder how that works, but they don't necessarily know how to even approach the topic of, let me see how this works. Let me figure out how I can do something similar. They don't necessarily know that that's an option. I know when I was in school, I didn't know that was an option until somebody actually gave me the opportunity to start making a dot go across the screen.
That's right. That's right.
And I didn't know that, that was even a possibility. So I am so excited about all of that. So hands-on learning seems to be a game changer for students.
I hope
So
so.
speaking of preparing, yeah. So speaking of preparing students, and this question and this topic comes from the difference in how I was taught when I was in school. It was more of a sit and get kind
Same.
of
Yep.
opportunity. Um, when my educational experience started changing, where I could start creating and engaging more with the material to make it similar and aligned with what I was experiencing in a life, I saw possibility.
Hmm.
But that really truly only happened when I became an adult.
Right.
And so, speaking of preparing students for the future, what skills or competencies do you think that will be most important for them to develop in order to thrive in this tech-driven world?
Whew. I mean, I think it's probably a long list. What comes to mind immediately is um, a piece that we lean in pretty hard with the VW eLabs, for sure, and it's become pervasive for us in all of our work. So we think about those essential skills, right? We call them essential skills, and there's a big list, right? But and they probably all matter, so it's hard to pick one or two. What I think becomes clearer is as technology becomes more pervasive and as our interactions become both more woven, interwoven with technology, but sometimes isolated to technology, whether it's through computing or generative AI or virtual reality, whatever. Um, I think there's a couple of things that are like uniquely human that rise to the top. So a frame for that for me is sorry, I keep making the thumbs up happening on the screen here. A frame for that is that I think that I think it's clear that the one predictable thing over the next decade is that like things are definitely going to change. I think what's
Yes.
difficult to predict is how they're going to change, right? Or what's going to change. So if that's the case, then I think agility and adaptability become critically important, right? I'll speak about my own kids, my high school freshman. I'm confident that the world she enters, like will she use a 3D printer in her career? Who knows? That's going to matter a lot on what field she goes into. Is 3D printing still relevant? Has it been replaced with a technology that I'm unaware of? It's being developed in a lab somewhere. These are all possibilities, right?
Right.
What I'm 100% confident in is that she'll enter the workforce and definitely will have to learn how to do a new thing in a new context, right? So learning how to learn and having the skills necessary to quickly learn a new skill or competency, apply it in a given context, I think is a critically important piece. And then I think there's some basics like communication and resilience. Can I stick through it, and can I communicate effectively about whatever the issues are? um Both within the sort of interdepartmental communication, but also public communication. I think both of those are continue to play an important role. But we see a lot of students really struggle with sort of stick with itness, right? To persist past the first, I don't know how
Mhm.
to do this, or
Right.
I'm scared to look stupid, right? When your whole life is recorded and published online, man, that really de-incentivizes you to take risk, right? I want to try anything new, try anything I'm not good at. Well, if I never
Mhm.
try anything I'm not good at, I never discover what I'm good at, right? So like I'm constantly got to be put in a situation to do that. So there's a lot of psychology in that, right? There's a lot of pieces in there. But I think from our perspective, what we try to lean really hard in is when students can use things like what the technology found in a Volkswagen eLab or in Fab Labs, right? Digital fabrication technology. When they can make functional solutions to authentic problems, it it creates a natural motivational hook for the students. They want to bring their idea to life, which liberates the teacher to focus on cultivating and assessing, giving feedback on those essential skills so that I don't have to necessarily grade, did you use a 3D printer effectively to produce a product that worked? We were solving a relatively trivial problem anyways. But I'd really like to give you feedback on how I saw a lack of time management in the project and give some strategies on how might we better manage our time next time, or how do we hold our peers accountable in a collaborative team. You can't go straight to the principal every time your teammate doesn't carry their weight, but you have to do something. So were you proactive, and how did you do that, right? Did it result in screaming, or was there a professional way to handle that? These are all learned skills by adults, and I was fortunate to learn some of them growing up because of my surroundings, but I don't know that I ever had formal training in them, right? You just sort of with
Mhm.
maturity went, well, okay, I'll gotta figure out how to resolve conflict. Well, that's a learned skill. There's no reason we have to wait till we're 25 to figure that out. We can start in third grade, right? And start developing those skills and competencies. So for us, I know that's not like a tech answer, but in my mind, like you could get 5 programmers on here and they'll debate all day. Should we be in Python or C or Swift, whatever. Okay, like somebody needs to make that decision. I'm much more
Decision.
interested in the ubiquitous piece, right? We have the responsibility of educating 45,000 kids and preparing them for success. 10 of them might end up programming in Python. All 45,000 of them have to learn how to communicate and be resilient and be adaptable.
Absolutely. And we talk about how to teach those skills, how to teach true problem solving.
Mhm.
And your example is perfect for why we want to do what we're doing, why you want to continue the work of the PEF in the community, why educators need to reimagine and use innovation with their curriculum. Um, because the other thing was a lot of solutions and a lot of products and a lot of things that we use today or even used maybe in our generation. I'm making assumptions here, but in our generation, they came about because someone experienced a problem.
That's right.
And the only way to fix it was to find a solution versus, oh, I messed up and then I have to throw it away. Post-it notes, white out, all both of those are
Mhm.
products because of a issue and a problem. And
Yep.
instead of just tossing it out, they were like, well, maybe I need to go back and reinvent, you know,
Yes,
a
ma'am.
solution for this problem. So it's important that our students get that and they don't throw it away, because even on, like, if you do a TikTok and you don't like how it looks, you press delete and it's
That's
gone forever.
that's right.
I remember typing. If I typed a wrong word, a wrong letter, or I had typed the whole paper, it wasn't as easy as pressing delete and the whole, we had to figure out something. And so they don't have those experiences because they have access to the delete. So those skills are very important. And something else that I've been thinking about is how can we use technology to create more equitable learning environments? And you touched on that. But how can we better utilize technology to ensure every student, regardless of their background, has access to the same opportunities and the tools, and stop just putting a laptop in front of a kid and say, y'all have equitable access? I'm sorry. That's just one of my.
No, no need to apologize. I'm with you 100% right there. I actually wrote my master's thesis, 15 years ago now, on why schools should stop wasting money on interactive whiteboards. I couldn't figure out why we're spending $6,000 to have a teacher stand at the front of the room and use an electronic whiteboard. That made no sense to me. I'm a tech head. I love the technology, not the least bit interested in didactic instructional strategies. uh, I'm being reductive. I know that's not the only thing you use those
It's
boards for, but
okay. It's okay.
I'm tracking with you 100%. So yeah, don't let me present this like it's like we have a silver bullet or we figured this out. I think for us, we start the frame here with it's a continuum. It's a for us, it's a focus point, but it's definitely not a problem we've solved, right? So just to be clear on the front end, but it has been a thing. It's part of what attracted me to the Public Ed Foundation. We've been around 35 years. I've been with the organization for about 8 or 9. And since their founding, they have centered equity before it was cool to talk about, right? Especially maybe in the deep South. Um, so that's been a piece that's been a focal point for the Public Ed Foundation's work here in our community since they started in the 80s. For us, what that looks like now, the last 5 or 6 years especially, we've really started. The language you use is exactly how we talk about that. Is like, as Chromebooks became prolific and COVID, if there was a good thing of COVID in school, maybe it was that more schools went one-to-one, so more kids had access. But to act like giving every kid a Chromebook that you then can check a box, and I'm not saying our school district did this, but I've felt it in other places for sure, that you just check the box and go, well, check equitable opportunity. Like, well, wait a minute. Like that's crazy. That's like sticking a car in a garage for a kid that's never seen one, a parent that's never seen one, being like, okay, y'all can fix the engine now. Like,
Right.
what? That's crazy. Like, we would never do that, right? Hopefully, we never do that. So when we look at computers, I think for me, what we lean in pretty hard, not just in computing, but as we think about sort of how technology has evolved in the last decade, and we think specifically through that sort of equity lens. Um, where we get excited, where I get excited certainly, and our team at the foundation, we get really excited about how technology has definitely provided more opportunity to provide more personalized experiences. Right. And when I think about equity, hyper personalization becomes the like maybe the lever I'm most interested in pulling on, because hyper personalization accounts for culturally relevant experiences. It accounts
Mhm.
for um, you know racial and cultural backgrounds. It accounts for socioeconomic experiences, right? It accounts for a number language barriers, physical or mental challenges that a student may be dealing with, right? So if we can like radically personalize every experience, then it becomes less about, well, look, the rich kids and the poor kids both got a Chromebook. We did it equal. And it becomes a lot more about, hey, when we give those kids a Chromebook, the rich kids are like, well, thanks. I've got a much better computer at home and I've been using it with my parents for the last 20 years. And the poor kid might go, I'm I've never really seen anybody use email. Like I don't have those skills baked into my experience. So how are we personalizing that experience, right? Are we providing tailored supports? Are we providing those unique opportunities? The challenge on personalization has always been time, right? It's capacity.
Yes.
If I have one teacher for 30 kids, how do I have the capacity to give those hyper personalized experiences? suddenly, I mean, this is where I get really excited. I won't ramble long, but where I get excited about artificial intelligence is I think it's starting to give us an opportunity to say, I can analyze and give feedback faster. If I can be more efficient, if I can buy an extra 3 or 4 hours a day, what can I do with those? Man, I could start personalizing experiences for students, both directly with technology, but also in my interaction with them as a teacher. That That's something where I get going pretty quickly because I start to think about like, man, like the ability and opportunity to provide, culturally relevant texts and instructional strategies and assessment strategies and feedback. Gosh, all of that stuff just gets elevated, right? We're able to really, for English language learners, we're able to provide a lot of different kinds of scaffolds that are just otherwise, not
Mhm.
possible, or they're possible but not practical because of limited resources and time.
Yes, absolutely. And even we think about the students, but then think about the educators. They don't
Yes,
all come with the same background experiences and exposure too. And so you kind of level the playing field because you're expecting a certain level that's standardized across all of the curriculum, all of the state, all of the schools, all of the districts, but you don't come with the same tools in your tool bag when it comes to being able to educate students in the classroom. And then you're asking them to take what you have and then make everything equitable for everybody else. And you're like,
that's right.
but I wasn't taught. I mean, I can tell this story now, it's fine. But when I started in education, I had very limited exposure to special education instruction and how to do what I needed to do. And
Sure.
I was placed in the classroom, one of the best experiences that I had, but the majority, over half of my students had an IEP.
Wow.
And I did not know I didn't have all the tools to help all of the different students immediately. So I
Sure.
had to go and seek out resources, but if we use technology to level the playing field, we can use some of the generative AI, say, what's the best accommodation for this particular student IEP, or their challenge that they have to make sure that they have equitable access to the curriculum like other
That's right.
students. So that's one of my best examples of how it could use. So before we wrap up, here's another heavy one. I'd like to hear your thoughts about the ethical concerns that come with technology's growing presence in education. What should educators and innovators be thinking about when it comes to ethics and responsibility in the digital age?
Oh man, I may just answer the last one again. I mean, so this is definitely not where my expertise is. I'll go back to sort of where we started and say, um, I think technology can be used as, it's just a tool, right? So used for good and bad, good or bad, or good and bad, right? For good or evil. And and in that regard, like you can't say that and then not talk about ethics, and how we have to be conscientious and cognizant. I mean, and generative AI on the ethics front is really bringing some critically important questions. I mean, it in some ways it forces us to talk about implicit bias and explicit bias in a way that is maybe uncomfortable, in certain communities, but we can't not talk about it. In some ways, it makes it easier to talk about because we're talking about an artificial intelligence system. We're not attacking people or
Yes.
ideologies. We're going, well, look, this is the data set the system was trained on. The data set is based on a written account of history, and we can't deny there's bias in that data set, and that's surfaced in our interaction. So it creates an interesting opportunity, on even just the bias conversation, right? I think that becomes sort of a gateway to saying things like, I remember when I first started teaching, Wikipedia was just becoming a thing. And I remember teachers being like, gosh, for 4 or 5 years, it seemed like you would hear teachers routinely sort of get on a soapbox about, don't use Wikipedia. It's not a valid source. It's not an academic source. And like, I'm not a research scientist. I don't work in higher ed. I won't pretend to be an academic. Um, but I do believe in crowdsourcing. Right? So like now, like Wikipedia turns out pretty darn accurate. Maybe not what we should be
Yes.
citing in formal research papers, granted. But I mean, I think about that from 20 years ago as sort of an ethics conversation with technology and education. Was Is Wikipedia a reasonable source, and And that it really wasn't a linear question, right? A direct question of was Wikipedia reasonable, but it really surfaced a conversation around how do we vet our sources and what does it mean to
Yes.
be a reliable source? And I think that's an important question. It also that was coming along just as sort of Google was becoming a verb, and right, and you suddenly had students being able to cheat in ways they couldn't cheat prior, right? And now when I think about generative AI, you can't talk about generative AI in school and not talk about cheating, um, and defining cheating. And the moment you tried to define cheating today, it's really curious, right? The terms and conditions with ChatGPT say if I wrote the prompt and it produces content, I own the rights to that content. Well, that's my content, so I turned in my content. Did I cheat? Well, if the writing exercise was intended to assess my ability to write, I
Right.
misrepresented my skills. If the
Yes.
writing exercise was to provide me any mechanism, use any mechanism at my disposal to communicate information about a particular topic, maybe I didn't cheat. All right. So it's a really, I think we have to start, um, not start. Education has always been considering this topic, but I think particularly with generative AI in school, we've got to really start thinking about number one, is the assessment we're giving is the best way to assess the content we're looking for. Are we using the best option? And number two, when we do allow students, or when students do use, whether allowed or not, do use technology to enhance their abilities, um, what are the implications there? Right. I was not a writing teacher. I taught math, but I was having a conversation with a colleague a couple months ago about this. We were talking about his daughter, very, very bright. She's full scholarship student at university now. She did a ton of writing her senior year of high school. She was in an IB program, right? This was just as generative AI was coming to the forefront. And as she did all this writing, on the one hand, you could make a strong argument she should have been using Chat GPT for everything, or a variant for all of her writing, because it's pervasive in the marketplace. She should equip herself with the skills to use the tools that are in the marketplace. On the other hand, most of her writing assignments, she was writing not for the sake of being a better writer. She was writing to enhance learning, right? The process of writing was writing it in her brain. We know the research on like what writing does to the learning process for the individual, how it helps you internalize and digest and better understand, develop a deeper understanding, create connections, right? All those things. If she had used ChatGPT for all of her writing, she would have robbed herself of the opportunity to engage in deep learning. So is that an ethical conversation? Maybe. Misrepresenting your work is always an ethical conversation. But it's also a learning psychology, the science of learning conversation. And from an educator standpoint, I think it's an instructional strategy, assessment strategy conversation,
Mhm.
right? Like, am I using the best available instructional strategy today, the best available assessment
Absolutely.
strategies? So it's really fascinating.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it goes back to something you said earlier, teaching some of those soft skills. And I think teaching integrity
Mm,
also is important in a way. Just how do you represent yourself and how do you represent your product that you are producing?
that's
Is
right.
it something that you created? Is it something that you've created with the assistance? And those different varying levels of interaction with technology and its influence on the final product is, for me, a point of integrity.
Absolutely. And and
So,
we desperately need leaders in every sector that like integrity should be a marker of being a strong leader, right? So I think it's critically important. I agree 100%.
absolutely. So thank you, Mr. Stone. I think our listeners will really appreciate these insights, and it's clear that the future of education is shaped in remarkable ways, and we have to be cognizant of our influence on the landscape of technology in the future. But before we sign off, is there any advice you'd give to educators and students looking to embrace technology and create positive societal change?
Yes. I wrote it down in a book that we give away for free. So so we give the ebook away. It's you can go to letmetryitbook.com. That's letmetryitbook.com. And the title is the main point. You want to learn how to embrace technology? Try it. You have to do it. The first thing we do when we open VW eLabs, we put teachers in a lab and give them a challenge with no instructions and literally like just jump in and try it. You got to mess with the stuff. It's how you've learned to do anything else you've ever done that was meaningful was doing it, not somebody telling you about it.
Yes.
So you can take a class, great, but do it. Like just go do it. Try it, fail at it, evaluate why you failed, and keep improving.
And how can our listeners connect with you and continue the exchange of ideas?
Sure. Probably easiest on email. My email is mstone at pefchattanooga.org. You could also find me on LinkedIn under Michael Stone. I don't know if there's some like specific handle on LinkedIn, but I'm pretty active on all social media. But LinkedIn's probably easiest to find me.
All righty. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show. For those tuning in, be sure to subscribe to the Doc Y Exchange so you don't miss more exciting conversations like this one. Until next time, remember, whether it's in education, technology, or life itself, there's always something new to learn and exchange. This is Doc Y signing off. Stay curious and keep exploring.